Every once in a while, a game that feels like a breath of fresh air will come out. A concept that was not previously really explored too much. A game that, if successful, could set a blueprint for future games. The developer of Meteor Maker, Behavior Interactive, seems to be a studio that generally tries to make these types of games, rather than going with the tried and true formulas. For example, their most well-known game, Dead by Daylight, carved out a niche for itself and has a cult following that still plays the game years after release. Hell, the game even spawned multiple clones of itself. So, what about Meteor Maker? Can it reach the same status, or is this something entirely different? We'll explore that in this review. Meteor Maker is not a game that you can really judge by the metrics that you judge most other video games on, because the heart of Meteor Maker is interacting with other players through your gameplay and the creations that you or them make. So the game itself is really more of a toolbox rather than an actual game. To truly evaluate it and its longevity and the potential for becoming a cult classic or a genre maker, we really need to dive deep into the mechanics and the tools that it gives you and come to a conclusion armed with that information. Do I think that it will have the same impact as Dead by Daylight? Well, no, and I will explain why. But I still absolutely think that you should play Meteor Maker if it sounds appealing to you. With the expectations properly set, let's begin. The most interesting thing about Meteor Maker is probably its concept. Just by explaining that a part of the game is about building your own home base in a saw version of Minecraft to protect the treasure, and the other part of the game is invading other people's bases to steal their treasure, is enough to get your imagination going and get you interested in the game. Add to that you're playing a post-apocalyptic cyber ninja, and the game sounds even more interesting from there. This type of a game was not really something that we have explored on PC and consoles a lot, especially not in a PvP manner, and the mobile games that did were based around systems that were designed to bleed your wallets dry rather than being an actual balanced and fun game, and they were not something that a core gamer audience would enjoy. I'm happy to say that Meteor Maker is very fair in the execution of the concept. You buy the game for $30 and for now that is it. There is no microtransactions, there is no additional purchases except the digital deluxe edition, which gives you a few skins right now. The devs did say, however, that the first batch of DLC will include a new suit, new weapons, new augments, and that it will be free. What that does imply is that the future ones will be paid, and I am not a fan of that. If you want to monetize content like that, $30 is too much to ask upfront, unless you are a fighting game and each new character takes an insane amount of work from every department in your studio. With there currently being only 2 suits and 2 different weapons of each type, putting everything else behind the paywall, even though the game is $30, is a bit too much. On the other hand, even though there are resources to grind, you can't buy them with real money, and it doesn't feel like a grindy free-to-play game. If you play long enough, at hour 20 or 25, you will probably have everything unlocked. The whole progression system does, however, feel a bit meaningless because the upgrades that you get are minimal, and I'm completely fine with that. I like having almost everything from the get-go, and having a few accessories and just a few minor upgrades locked from the start is something that I am a fan of. Especially because those things don't make you necessarily more powerful, but they just give you alternate playstyles. Now, since the game is split into 2 halves, being a creator and being an invader, let's start with the creator tools to be able to understand the structure of the game a bit better. And before we dive into all of them, I have to shout out the best thing in this game. This is a replay machine. It lets you look at how other people died in your bases, and if that doesn't make you happy, then this game is not for you. It is hilarious watching people fall directly into the traps that you set for them. While reviewing, I have only made 1 base so far, but this feature has made me so hyped to make bigger ones in the future, just because I can actually see the players interacting with them. And if there isn't a YouTube channel about base building and death compilations in the base, I will consider this game a failure. Jokes aside, the game gives you a ton of creative freedom when making bases, and the only limits to how far you can go are the base building gaps, which we will talk about, and how much patience you have to actually build things out. There are 3 difficulty levels in the game. Those would be normal, dangerous, and brutal, and depending on the difficulty that you're making the base for, you'll have a different amount of resources to use while making the defenses. The normal difficulty one locks you into having like 5 or 6 traps with a few guards, while the brutal one you will be able to have 10 or 15 times as many. Besides that, there are barely any restrictions, which does mean that the quality of levels will vary a lot. But that is the part of the charm of the game, I would say. You never know what you will get with the next level, even though you're selecting a difficulty that should tell you what you'll expect. One big downside of this system is that the creators are actually incentivized to make maps that are harder rather than actually fun, because every time someone dies in your base, you get a few resources. There is even a mode that you can select for your base that increases how much resources you get when somebody dies, but when they beat your base, you will lose some resources too, which really incentivizes you to just make it hard as hell. A common thing that people seem to do on the brutal difficulty is put all of the traps and the enemies in one room, making it insanely difficult to go through just so that they could farm you for resources. The developers are trying to combat this issue with an accolade system, where if somebody is making an unfair type of map, those maps will usually be recommended less because people will not be rating them at the end of the run. Since this is a day 1 and day 2 review, the algorithm still probably hasn't kicked in that well, so we'll see how effective this is over time. But that being said, the super hard levels are still not that big of an issue. It's like 1 in every 5 levels. It doesn't really ruin the experience. And at the end of the day, the difficulty is called brutal. That is what you should expect. Some players will find this type of challenge fun, even though I have a feeling it will turn away most people from playing the hardest difficulty, at least until the map recommendation algorithm kicks in a bit more. But until then, playing brutal for me is still fun, and playing dangerous is probably the most optimal experience if the designer has made the map well. Now, let's talk about your tools as an invader. You will be in this gameplay mode for the most of your time in Meteor Maker, so it is incredibly important that it feels good and responsive to control. I'm also super happy to say that it does. Once you get quick with your tools, you will feel like a badass straight out of something like Attack on Titan with your grappling hook. The upgrades on your suit and weapons don't fundamentally change anything about the way you play, they just buff you up a bit. And the accessories that you take will not make or break a run. They're just interesting side-grade tools that can help you in certain situations. For example, if a level has a really hard final room where you need to stand in place, you can drop down a shield, or if a level has a really hard to traverse room at the end of the run that you gotta play perfectly, you can just put a respawn beacon and give yourself one more shot so you don't have to restart the whole level if you die. The accessories are versatile, well balanced, and they don't trivialize the game and are satisfying to strategically use. And this ties into the second issue I have with the game. Generally, we judge character movesets and levels based on how well they play with each other. Celeste's tight puzzle rooms only work because the moveset that you get in Celeste plays incredibly well in those tight spaces. If you put Super Meat Boy in a Celeste level, you would probably have a miserable time, and vice versa. In this game, the level designers are the players themselves, so many levels will not properly utilize the tools that you have due to players being amateur game designers, and due to the game incentivizing you to just make really hard levels. The levels will purposely feel unfair and will look to limit the tools that you can use in each encounter and not to maximize their usage. For example, here is a trap that I made. It makes you destroy the arrow dispenser by range, and then when you grapple to pick up the ammo, another trap is set off to punish the most basic gameplay loop that the game teaches you. Instead of the map being designed to get you into a flow state, to use everything at your disposal, the levels will punish you for using your character's tools in a way that is intuitive. However, on the flip side, it will make you feel like a mastermind when you can predict everything that the game master will throw at you, so it is a really tight balance. If carefully going through claustrophobic levels, second guessing your choices, and then finally making a perfect plan that takes into account all possible errors really sounds fun to you, then you will love this game. However, if you're more of a player that likes to just go forward and then do everything with reflexes, this is not gonna be something that you will enjoy. One thing that I'm not as optimistic about in terms of this game is having a lot of longevity. Most games that people play for months and years tend to have an incredibly high skill ceiling or some sort of a drawing to make you coming back, like playing famous serial killers, for example. The experience of Meteor Maker is inherently lonely rather than social, even though you technically interact with other players. So maybe having some extra social features, like for example track of the day in Trackmania and leaderboards for who beat the daily level the fastest, would be something that the game could use in order to foster that sort of a dedicated player base that will play this game every day. In other similar games, and I will take Trackmania as it is the closest analog, you have so many social features to keep you coming back daily, like daily tournaments, you have clubs, and all the maps are made in styles that really complement the card handling instead of going against the game mechanics. Hopefully Meteor Maker finds a way to incentivize creation of maps that don't really force you to slow down and be careful, but somehow encourage you to be flashy and let you compete with other players, because that sort of thing generally makes the player base stay for a long time. I know that there are some social features in the game, but what is currently there is not accessible enough. Performance on PC is amazing. I tested with a 1060 6GB at 1080p and a 3080 at 1440p. 1060 pushes 60 FPS easily at the high preset, and 3080 gets 100 plus on everything maxed out. The optimization just feels great. I did experience 2 crashes, but those were in loading screens and nothing too disruptive besides that. Of course, I always say, if you buy the game and it doesn't perform well, ask Steam for a refund. As long as you're under 2 hours of playtime, they will provide you with a refund, no questions asked. Final thing that I will add is that this game is really enjoyable in co-op. I've played for about 6 hours with my girlfriend, and we had a blast figuring out how to get each other out of terrible situations on brutal difficulty, and figuring out how to clear rooms in synchronized ways. And due to the nature of the game where everything can kill you, many hilarious moments are bound to happen. With all of that being said, I think that it is fairly obvious that I do recommend that you try this game if it looks fun to you. It is an incredibly unique offering that is well worth the $30, considering that there is literally infinite amount of content and that you get to see all the crazy stuff that people will be coming up with. Without the social features that we talked about, it might not be a game that you will play for 1,000 hours, but it is definitely a game that you can have fun with for about 30 to 100 hours, and even dig deeper with its vast map creation tools if you're the type of player that finds something like that fun. Just please don't build any death boxes. Thank you very much for watching. My name has been Acencial, and I will see you next time.